8th grade math. How we doing? Totally understand that maybe the surface area was a little bit confusing with the prisms. So going into today's cylinders, I thought we'd do a little review, and so I created this little viewfinder that we can look at so you can watch. I wonder if I can open that. Can I make that bigger? Oh yes, look at that. Mr. Mac is so good sometimes with technology. All right, that's as big as it gets. All right, here we go. So here, well, let's start with the rectangular prism. All right, so here's our traditional rectangular prism, and well, let's do it this way because then when we open it up. So yesterday we talked about the lateral area, which is the area around, and then the two bases. And these bases have to be parallel to each other. Parallel. So if we put our hands on the bases, we notice that they create parallel lines. So when I talked about the lateral area, if we open it up, let's do it this way. If we open it up, we create this rectangle. And this rectangle happened to be, if we look at this base, right, the rectangle, if we found the area of this, any rectangle is going to be base times height. So what does this base on the bottom represent? Well, if we look at these four pieces, that actually was the distance around the figure. So if we looked and saw, that's why I called it the perimeter, because it's the distance around the base. So if we looked at the base and looked at its shape, we would know that that would represent the base of this rectangle that consists of the lateral area. And then the height is always going to be the distance. The height is always going to be the distance between these two bases. So that's kind of interesting, and we'll go into it a little bit more. But let me do the triangular prism also. So when we have this triangular prism, see it right here, if we look at the lateral area, we see that also creates a rectangle. And notice what this base consists of. This base again consists of the distance around the base. So that perimeter of this rectangle, of the lateral area rectangle that we create, this bottom, the base of this lateral area will always be the perimeter around that base. So maybe that even helps too, because you see that this is this leg and this is this one, and then we can see that. So and then you have your two shapes, your two bases, which are the shape of our rectangle, or triangle, excuse me. So let's minimize this a little bit, and let's go back into communicating let's keep making that a little bit smaller. All right, so here I have drawn a square prism. This is, come on, no, don't want to work. This is a square prism. This is a rectangular prism. This is a triangular prism. And this technically would be considered a circular prism, because let's look at the shape of each of those bases. So if we look at the base, no, let's not do green, let's do this. So that base shape is a square. The base shape is a rectangle. The base shape is a triangle. The base shape is a circle. So that is our shape. That's how we end up classifying, and because there's two of them, we have a prism. That's why it's considered a prism. Now, remember, if I open this up, I get a lateral area that is a rectangle, and I get two bases. I get a square and a square. if I look at the lateral area, and then I get two rectangles as my base shape. If I look at here, my lateral area is a rectangle, and then my base shape are two triangles. What we'll find out today is that my circular prism, or known as a cylinder, will also have a rectangular lateral area, and the two bases will be circular. So this is my lateral area, my lateral area, my lateral area, and lateral area. And these are my bases, B1, B2, B1, B2, B1, B2, B1, B2. So we know that when we find the area of the lateral area, which is a rectangle, we're always going to use, let's erase this this is a rectangle, so it's always going to be base times height. Base times height, base times height, base times height. And our base in this case, as I explained to you, our base here is going to be the perimeter. It's going to be the distance around this object. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to find out what the measures of each of those are. And that will consist of my perimeter. So if I want to find the base of this rectangle, it's going to be the distance around the rectangle. If I want to find the base of this triangular prism, it's going to be the distance around the triangle. If I want to find the base of this cylinder, it's going to be the distance around the base. And so we call it perimeter in each of the polygonal bases, but in a circular base, so if we, let's pull those down, that's considered the perimeter. This is considered the perimeter. This is considered the perimeter. Come on. Doesn't like that. Okay. Oh, it doesn't want to. That's considered the perimeter. And then what would we call the distance around a circle? We wouldn't call it a perimeter, we would call it the circumference. Good. So, and then it's the height. Everything is always going to be multiplied by the height, the height, the height, the height. And remember, the height is the distance between the two bases. So if we had to find the height, it's always going to be the distance between the two parallel bases. So this height is going to be the distance between here, the distance between here, the distance between here, and the distance between here. Because my two, if we look at it, right, if this is my cylinder, if these are my two bases, the distance is going to be between it. That's the height of that rectangle. It's going to be the distance between it. If I look at my triangular or my rectangular prism, right, here's my lateral area. That height is always going to be the distance between the two parallel sides. There we go. We can see that, or the two parallel bases. So that height of the rectangle is always going to be that distance between those two. And so that's going to be the height, the height, the height. And that's just to find the area of the lateral area. Then we're going to add it to the 2b, 2 times big B. And the base is, whether it's a square, it's going to be s squared. If it's a rectangle, it's going to be base times height. If it's a triangle, it's going to be base times height divided by 2. If it's a circle, what's it going to be? Pi r squared. We're just finding the area of these bases. And depending on the shape, we use the formula that it needs to use. So hopefully that helped you a little bit. So let's do a little quick review. we want to, let's do this. So this shape, we have a rectangular prism. So I'm going to take, if we look at this, let's use this diagram here. So I'm going to keep it sort of on an angle like this. I'm going to call this, oh, let's get a pen. I'm going to call this my base. That's going to be the top of the rectangular prism, and I'm going to consider that my base. So my lateral area is going to be this portion here, right? It's going to be this part going around that way. All right, so if this is my base, then when I do my lateral area, remember this is going to be the perimeter. So I'm going to go around my base. So what are the units going around the base? It's going to be 8 feet plus 10 feet plus 8 feet plus 10 feet. Let's just make sure we understand. 8 feet, 10 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet. And some people were having difficulties understanding, well, if that line is 10, that means any line parallel to it is going to be also 10. That distance is 10, that distance is 10. If it's parallel to it, then it's going to be the same unit. So if I take this line, let's find out what lines are parallel, because it doesn't have a measure right now, so I don't know how much it is. Well, it's parallel to that, so that's 8, and that's 8. And this bottom one is 8. And now, let's look at this one. What's that one? Well, let's look for a number. There's no number next to that line. Oh, that line. So that line here is also 8 feet. So that's another important component that I neglected to teach you yesterday. So we have our perimeter. Now, let's find the height. Remember, the height is the distance between the two bases. If this is one base and this is my other base, what's the distance between them? Well, that would be 8 feet. So now I'm able to figure out. So my perimeter is going to be 8 plus 10 plus 8 plus 10, which gives me 36 feet. And I'm going to multiply it by the height, base times height. The area of that equals base times height. So my base is 36 feet. My height is 8 feet, which gives me a total of 36. Oh, let's turn it on, clear. 36 times 8 gives me 288 feet squared. So that would be my lateral area. Now I'm going to add my two bases. And my base shape, as we drew earlier, my base shape is a rectangle. So I have two rectangles that I need to account for. And since they're rectangles, we know it's base times height. And what is the base? Well, let's make this the base, which is 8 feet. And then its height has to be perpendicular. So that would be 10 feet. And we have area equals base times height, base of 8 feet times the height, which is 10 feet, which gives me 80 feet squared. It's lagging big time. I am crunching a lot of energy with all these apps open. And I have two of them, so this one's going to be 80 feet squared also. And so if we add up the lateral area, 288 feet squared, plus my two bases, well, that's going to be 288 plus 80 plus 80, which gives me a grand total of the surface area equals 448 feet squared. So hopefully that helped you a little bit better. Let's try a triangular prism now. So again, surface area equals lateral area plus my two bases. So let's draw out my rectangle, my lateral area. So I know that this is going to be the perimeter times the height, right? The base times height when the base is equivalent to the perimeter. So the perimeter is going to be the distance around my base. I see that it's a triangular base, so I'm going to add up this distance, and this distance. That would be the distance around the base. So my first question is, since my first line, this line, what does that measure? So now I'm looking for a line that's parallel to it that has a number next to it. Oh, 12 kilometers. So this is going to be 12 kilometers. And then I have this, which is also 12 kilometers. And then I have this, which is 8 kilometers. So that'll give me, what's that? 32 kilometers. That would be my base of my rectangle. Because remember, my lateral area is going to be base times height because it's a rectangle. So my height, the height is going to be the distance between the two bases, which is going to be here. So my height is going to be 11 kilometers. So let's figure it out. Area equals base times height. My base is 32 kilometers times my height, which is 11 kilometers, which gives me 352 kilometers squared. That would be my lateral area. Now I have to add the two bases. And my two bases, what's the base shape? Is a triangle. And a triangle. So with my triangle, remember my base and my height have to be perpendicular. So I want to find a line that is going to be perpendicular to a base. That base has to be a side on the object. So it's relatively easy. We see that perpendicular right here. So my formula for the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. If this is my base, that's 12 kilometers. My height would be 7.5 kilometers. And let's divide it by 2. So let's do 12 times 7.5 gives me 90. Divided by 2 gives me 45 kilometers squared. So this one, we know that the other triangle is going to be 45 kilometers squared. So now we have all three. We have my lateral area, we have my base 1, and base 2. So let's add those together. Plus 352 gives me a grand total of 442 kilometers squared would be my surface area. Was that the area of the one before? No, 448. It's close though. That would have been weird. Okay, now let's move on to our circular prisms. Circular prism, remember, just like all of the prisms, and our circular prism is known as a cylinder, sorry about that. So we have a lateral area, which is a rectangle, plus 2 big B's. So we know that this isn't called perimeter anymore. Now it's called the circumference times the height. So the circumference of the circle is going to be the distance around the base. Circumference, we have two formulas. We're given the radius, so circumference equals 2 pi r. So 2 times 3.14 times the radius. The radius in this case is 9 feet, and then the height is going to be the distance between the two bases. So that's 7 feet. So remember, we still have an area of a rectangle. Base times height. My base, let's actually finish up that. That's 2.2 times 3.14 times 9 gives me a base of 56.52 feet. Notice only feet, not feet squared, because there's only one unit being multiplied in all those. 2, 3.14, and 9. Only 9 has the unit measure. So this is going to be my base. This is going to be my height. So I'm going to multiply my base times my height. So 56.52 times 7 gives me 395.64 feet squared. That is my lateral area, the area of my lateral. Good. Now I have my two bases. Well, I have two circles. So I have a circle and a circle. And we're finding the area. Formula for area of a circle is pi r squared. Pi, we're going to use 3.14. My radius is 9 feet. And we're going to square that. So 3.14, 9 feet squared gives us 81 feet squared. And let's do 81 times 3.14, which is 254.34 feet squared. That's for one circle. So we have the other one, which is going to be the same area. So we have our lateral area, our base, and our other base, feet squared. So 254.34 plus 254.34 plus 395.64 gives me a grand total of 904.32 feet squared. That would be the surface area of this cylinder. So what I would like you to do is take a moment, pause the video. I'd like you to do it out. Use the lateral area. I would probably advise you to draw that rectangle. Understand that the base of the rectangle is going to be the circumference of the base. And then draw out those two circles. When you have an answer, unpause it. And let's go over that answer. All right, so you should have surface area equals lateral area plus your two circles, your two bases. So I have my circumference, which is going to be the distance around that base. So my circumference is 2 pi r. So 2 times pi times the radius, which is 6 miles. So 2 times 3.14 times 6 gives me 37.68 miles. And now we have the two bases. So we have 2 times each area, the area of that circle. So this time we're trying to find the area here. So that's pi r squared, right? Pi r squared is the area of a circle. So my radius is 6 miles. Square that gives me 36 miles squared. And then multiply it by 3.14 and 2 gives me 226.08 miles squared, Mr. Mac. And so we're going to take that and we are going to add it to the lateral area. So 226.08 miles squared plus 226.08 miles squared gives us 452.16 miles squared. Some of you will find in books that surface areas of cylinders is going to equal 2 pi RH plus 2 pi r squared. And this is the circumference times the height plus 2 areas of circle. That is a plug and play. If you use that, you probably don't understand it as well as what we just explained, but you could use this every single time for all cylinders. You cannot, there is no formula that you can apply to for our prisms because their base shapes are constantly different. So notice it changes depending. You have side square, you have base times height, you have base times height divided by 2. But we know in all cylinders, we're always going to have the same base. The base in all cylinders are going to be circular. The bases on prisms will change depending on what it is. So that's why you don't have a uniform formula like you would with a cylinder. Hope this helps. This was a long-winded one, but I think much needed. Thanks very much for all your patience, and good luck. And hopefully I'll see you in office hours.